Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 16, Episode 86. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Wednesday, Steelers Nation. It was day one for new Steelers head coach Mike McCarthy holding his press conference on Tuesday, officially signing the 5-year deal that makes him the 17th head coach in Pittsburgh Steelers history. Got that to talk about, Dave. Have some offensive and defensive coordinator candidates to discuss and a little bit more. And also, Dave, it's 8 degrees here. Are you familiar with the you have to let your sink drip and keep your faucet on because it gets so cold trick? Have you done that before?
Very few times in my life, especially coming from the deep south, have I ever had to do that. And I don't think I've had to do that out in Las Vegas in the almost 10 years that I've been out here as well. So yeah, that I've seen it done up north in Detroit in a limited amount of time that I've spent up there. But no, you can have that kind of stuff.
Chinese water torturing myself over here the last couple of days. But Dave, forget about my problems. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, and let's just dive on in with the Mike McCarthy press conference that was held Tuesday afternoon. Accompanying McCarthy at the table was Omar Khan and Art Rooney II. McCarthy very emotional as he talked about coming home, returning to Pittsburgh, his family sitting in the front row. About a 30-minute presser. McCarthy mostly spoke. A little bit from Omar Khan, a little bit from Rooney as well. But of course, this was Mike McCarthy's big day. So just big picture, kind of as the standard 30,000-foot view, your initial impression of that initial press conference.
All right. First and foremost, I'm coming to grips that I now live in a world where the Steelers have a new head coach. Bill Belichick's not a Hall of Famer on the first ballot, and Shadur Sanders is in the Pro Bowl.
Our pets' heads are falling off over here, man.
That's the first 30,000 foot kind of look there. Look, we knew going into this press conference with Mike McCarthy, how much it means or meant to him to return to Pittsburgh and be the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you needed any confirmation of that, you just had to watch the first 5 minutes of him speaking. Very emotional on his part. And beforehand, the team released, a statement, from both Art Rooney the second, and then obviously one from Mike McCarthy, and then McCarthy opened up with essentially reading his complete statement, and he was choked up several times while doing so. So from the aspect of how bad and did McCarthy want this job, and what does this job mean to McCarthy, I think it goes without saying that yes, 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 yes. I mean, if Mike McCarthy was to, in his days after being a head coach in the NFL, wanted to be the executive director of the Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce, I think he would easily get that job as well too. This guy, really at his roots, is a Pittsburgh guy, and I think first and foremost, that stuck out, and it wasn't a surprise, but I came close to wondering if people were cutting onions in my house at the start of that, but I don't want to say it was great theater or anything like that, but I just think
it was genuine. It was real.
It was genuine. It was real. It was and it wasn't shocking, I don't think, either there. So this is a guy that knows what this job means, knows the expectations that comes along with it, knows the rabid fan base, and everything that goes along with that. So I have no problem with him reading essentially his statement that he had prepared or that was released ahead of time, because there's probably no other way that he gets through it if he's not as choked up as he was without having read, his prepared statement.
I went back and listened to his intro press conference in 2020 whenever the Dallas Cowboys hired him. And after a very long opening statement from Jerry Jones, which is no surprise there, Mike McCarthy's first comments was about how big of a room it was, how big the facility was, how kind of grandiose just the Dallas Cowboys franchise is. Everything's state of the art, everything's over the top. Even talked about him on this table, not at a podium, not used to that. When McCarthy spoke about Pittsburgh yesterday, he talked about coming home and his family and what it means to steward was the word that he used, this franchise. And so there was a different feel and commentary from Dallas, kind of about the glitz and the glam in Pittsburgh, just about coming home. Now, you can only play the Pittsburgh kid angle for so long. And once the game starts, you start losing. No one cares about where you're from. The results are all that matters. But there certainly was a different tone, just comparing and contrasting what he said in Dallas 5 years ago or 6 years ago compared to in Pittsburgh yesterday.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. Look, this is a coming home situation for him, and then once again, he knows everything, the pressure and everything that goes along with this. There's no doubt that he's going to, that he's going to give it his all and try to bring the next Lombardi to the city of Pittsburgh here. And now the question is, and like you said too, that the Pittsburgh guy will wear off here soon after. I don't think overall a lot of people opinions have changed about just based off of one press conference. Whether or not they went into it thinking this is the wrong hire. I see a lot of people saying no. It was great for him to have the emotion and all like that. But a lot of people still stand by, and you shouldn't be swayed by one press conference, even though in a nutshell, you talk all the time about, did a head coach, win or lose the press conference there? I think he won it, but I think it was expected that he would win it. And even though Art Rooney says, we're not expecting to win the press conference, I think he did win it. But now that that's behind us, it's time to get to work. And I think McCarthy understands that as well.
Sure. He did well. I thought he did fine, as expected, maybe a bit better than expected, but he's a guy that's been a head coach 3 times, has held hundreds of press conferences, just did and dabbled in TV with Pat McAfee during his off year in 2025, and so he's very comfortable in front of a camera. You can certainly see why he was a good interview, and I'm sure why Pittsburgh felt kind of sold on him because he talks openly and honestly and pretty plainly and gives you, I think, some pretty direct answers. And his most direct answer of the entire press conference day was the second question that he was asked once the presser was open to reporters, asked about, do you want Aaron Rodgers back? And he said, definitely, unequivocally, I would love to have Aaron Rodgers back. That why would you not want to have this guy? And so that kind of not just cracks that door, but leaves it wide open for Rodgers to return.
Yeah, and verbatim, he says, definitely, I don't see why you wouldn't. But just like anything, knowing Aaron long enough, going through seasons, I think when players, then he says to see Mel Blunt here, when guys are up there at that stage of their career, they need to step away and decompress. The game is so emotional with what these men commit to, what they put into it. I think that time away is important. He says, I have spoken to Aaron. So that's really where we are, where we are there. I was able to sit back and watch the games, watched most of the Pittsburgh games on TV, and I thought he was a great asset for the team. So, yeah, not surprising that he's talked to Aaron. I was hoping that he would be prodded several times for a more direct answer on or at least his thoughts on Aaron possibly returning. I wasn't sure if he would kind of dance around it or not. So I was a bit surprised that right out of the chute that he said, now look, you could, there could be the political aspect of this as well too. Well, yeah, in other words, not completely closing out the door. And even Art Rooney II, just a couple of weeks ago, had mentioned, well, we saw how attracted he was to Mike Tomlin. It does leave up into question whether or not Aaron Rodgers would return. But now that they got his former head coach there, and a guy that it seems like Aaron Rodgers still has respect for and would potentially be willing to play for. Uh, the door is open at this point. And obviously, later in the press conference, McCarthy was asked about was there a potential time frame that that they would need a decision by from Rodgers when it comes to his potential return, and he did kind of punt on that. I think that was kind of to be expected, and Omar Khan, did as well too. Just saying it hasn't been discussed. I would imagine that within the next couple of days or week or two, that they would at least discuss, when is kind of the drop dead date. And you would think with free agency right around the corner in the middle of March, how active or not active the Steelers might be at the quarterback position would depend on Aaron Rodgers' decision. And then most obviously, when you get into the draft at the end of April, whether or not you take a swing on yet another quarterback. Now, look, even if Aaron Rodgers does return with the amount of draft picks that this team has, assuming they don't have to package a lot of those up to maybe move up in other rounds there, could you potentially see this team taking yet another flyer on on a drafted quarterback, in the middle or late rounds, to give yet another young quarterback maybe for McCarthy to get his hands on and see what he can do with. And the fact that this team likes to take 4 quarterbacks to training camp in general, regardless of who the coach is. Yeah, I see that as a possibility. But I would at least think and hope that by the time the draft rolls around, that this team has a good sense of whether or not Aaron Rodgers is going to come back and sign with this team, and if he'll be around for the start of OTAs.
And remember, McCarthy comes from a Packers organization that loved drafting quarterbacks all the time and just keeping those cupboards full and taking flyers on guys and just seeing what might end up sticking. Matt Flynn and the like there. And obviously, Rodgers himself was first round pick before that was truly needed as a future plan that obviously turned out really well. And same with Jordan Love, even though he was not drafted during the McCarthy era. I thought it was interesting that whenever McCarthy was asked about the timetable, that he punted to Omar Khan, but then Khan just did not pick up that hot potato, just let that one go, and they moved on to the next question. So it's not to say that Khan would not want Aaron Rodgers back, but I don't think they want to put timelines on these things, at least not right now, because they, of course, were peppered with questions about that last year, and Rodgers is unpredictable, and so they don't want to have to put timelines that become big headlines and lines in the sand that you may or may not become committed to. So it's interesting that Khan just did not want to touch this subject there. What is Rodgers' timeline? It's hard to say. You prefer it not to go into June again, although that Rodgers knows his offense. He could sit there in July and pick it up probably from day one. And Rodgers is not one who loves the offseason program, the voluntary stuff. He's on record talking about that. So what will that calculate and change his timetable? I don't know. I prefer it to be before free agency, so Pittsburgh can know if they're going to go after Malik Willis or maybe make a trade for Mac Jones or Kyler or Tua, even if you don't like those options, which I don't. But those are all things that have to be into the equation. In Rodgers, whether or not he plays obviously impacts whether or not you go get a pretty marquee veteran name or not. So I would prefer it before free agency. The draft doesn't really matter to me because if there's a quarterback that you love, if you love Ty Simpson, you're going to draft him anyway because Rodgers is still not your long-term future. So that doesn't really impact things. But free agency could have an impact. No, if you don't know, whether or not Rodgers is playing. So I would prefer by, the next 6 weeks, if Rodgers can make a decision, that would be, I think, a fair and reasonable timeline.
Yeah, I would obviously like to see this thing sewed up by the time free agency starts in the middle of March. And here we are at the end. So, yeah, 6 weeks, like you said there. And look, there's a whole contract aspect of it as well, too, and the guaranteed money. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you're much more than what Aaron Rodgers earned last year, just in case you get to a situation where things don't go well for Aaron Rodgers at the start of the season. Then you want to transition to, say, a Will Howard or somebody else on the roster at that point. So, and then once again, to put Aaron hates rules, right, or parameters and all. So I don't think you're going to unequivocally see this team come out and say, we need Aaron Rodgers' decision by March 15th.
Sure.
And if we don't get it, we're going a different direction kind of thing. Now there might be signs, there might be prodding behind closed doors and all like that, but I don't think you're going to see this team unequivocally come out and say to the open media that March 15th is a line in the sand, because those kind of things normally don't work well with Aaron Rodgers. Now, as things sit right now in with this team's quarterback room, which potential quarterback, gives you the best chance to probably win the most games in 2026? Obviously, I think the answer to that is Aaron Rodgers. But does Aaron Rodgers get you anything more than the 10 wins and a playoff appearance like we saw in 2025? I think the answer is no. Personally, my hope is, and I don't think I'm going to get this, but personally, my hope is that Aaron Rodgers saves the Steelers from themselves.
By retiring?
Yeah, by saying, nope, that's it, I'm done. And then that forces the hand for the Steelers to go in another direction, and one that could potentially result in them not winning 10 games and maybe not making the playoffs next season. If Aaron Rodgers is re-signed, he is going to be your week 1 starter. I think that's obvious there. And then there's some degree of how long do you wait to pull the plug, and what does it do with potential development of either Will Howard or whoever else younger quarterback is on this team. Now, McCarthy did have some positive things to say about Will Howard, probably as expected, right?
Right. Just one more thing on Rodgers, and I know we'll have the whole months ahead to talk about it, so I don't want to spend too much time. Probably already spent too much time on it already, but it's obviously a headline situation. Could Rodgers do what he did last year of basically I think I'm coming to Pittsburgh, but I'm not quite ready yet, and kind of not string the team along, but just delay an official decision? Because whenever he arrived in March, Pittsburgh was in a situation where they pretty much knew he was going to sign. It just was going to take some time for him to get his affairs in order. Talked about the issues he was having in his personal life he wanted to work through before finally committing. So could this be a thing where he goes to the team next month and says, I think I'm going to come back, but I'm just not 100% there. I got some things I'm working on, my personal life again. I'll let you know. And they are kind of in this holding pattern until June again when Rodgers officially signs. I just wonder if Pittsburgh may end up going down that road again.
Okay, the short answer is, could it happen? The short answer is yes. Do I think it's healthy for such a situation to happen again for this team, especially with this transition? No, I do not think it's healthy for such a. I think the healthiest thing for this team to know is by March 15th or the start of the new league year that Aaron Rodgers is re-signing with this team, and he's going to be with this team at the start of OTAs. Okay, I understand. Last year the whole I think something was going on right with his sister and all like that, and the whole girlfriend thing and all like that, but that was last year. So that's been played. The last thing that this fan base and this organization needs to go through at this juncture is, will he or won't he heading up into past OTAs?
I agree. You certainly would love a finality to this thing before free agency. That is the ideal timeline, and still give Rodgers plenty of time and space to contemplate his decision. The one benefit this year compared to last year is this clock will hopefully be starting sooner than last year. The clock in Pittsburgh didn't begin until free agency in mid-March last year. It started after the wildcard loss this time around, so you already have kind of an extra
Right.
2-month buffer from where that decision hopefully starts compared to where it was last season. Last year was still
they had to wait. They had to wait for him to get cut officially too, right?
Right. And of course he wanted to meet the team and talk to Tomlin and come to the facility. And kind of get a sense of the organization. He knows the organization. Granted, it's a different organization, but with McCarthy in the fold, he knows McCarthy. There's going to be less unknowns about what Pittsburgh is all about and is it the right place for me and the right fit for me and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully that'll accelerate things. But again, it's unpredictable because Aaron Rodgers works on Aaron Rodgers time, and we're all just kind of waiting for him to provide an answer.
The only one of the main positives, I guess, about Aaron Rodgers coming back for 2026 is it gives him another year to, or however it may be, even obviously to start the season as a starter and then see how it goes, and then potentially on the bench as a backup. But it gives him another year to work with Will Howard and whatever other quarterbacks you have in that room. So that would be a positive. But the longer that Aaron Rodgers is the starter for this team, that's obviously less time on the field for Will Howard or whatever other quarterback you have on the roster.
Yeah, they can cut both ways. While you're still mentoring Howard, you're limiting any opportunity he has to see the field and to really evaluate the type of player that Will Howard is. So the benefit is he's probably your best quarterback option and pure talent, ability, and win now mindset. Rodgers is your best guy. He played well last year. It was a good fit. I certainly had his struggles, and the playoff game was a disaster. But if there's more talent around him, a more open passing offense, more what he's accustomed to with more receivers to throw to, he can certainly still have a lot of success. Is that going to get you to a Super Bowl? I very much doubt it. I think we all understand that point. And is there harm by staying in this purgatory and not kind of seeing what you have in Howard or trying something different? I think there certainly is a valid case to make for that, and I probably would be the one making that case. But just pound for pound, who is the most talented and best quarterback of all the possible options Pittsburgh could acquire for 2026? It's Aaron Rodgers.
Right. And like I said, which quarterback, as we sit here right now, gives you the best chance to win the most games in 2026? Unequivocally, I think that's Aaron Rodgers. However, how much, even though the familiarity with the Mike McCarthy, what he likes to do offensively and schematically, and assuming you get more talent at the wide receiver position around him, how much better or, what, especially from the key analytics aspect of it, do we expect Aaron Rodgers to be? And my answer to that would be not much. Maybe a slight improvement, but not enough where you're going to, I don't believe, kick the door down when it comes to the playoffs. And I think you could potentially, if Aaron Rodgers does play the whole season, we're right back to where we are.
Sure.
Right now, who is Will Howard or whoever other quarterback is on the roster? Who is that guy? Because of lack of playing time, and are you right in the middle of the pack, picking 20th, 21, 22 along those lines, and thus hurting your chances, or at least causing yourself to have to trade up to get a potential top quarterback in the 2027 draft? That is the biggest drawback, I think, with going with Aaron Rodgers. However, and you hear Art Rooney talk about, we don't rebuild, we continue to want to compete. Going down the road of Aaron Rodgers could, though, lead you in a situation where this organization's been in for quite a while, looking for another quarterback that somebody can develop to find out if that guy can be the franchise quarterback and get you over this purgatory of veteran guys.
Last thing I'll say is a reason not to bring Rodgers back, or to not want to bring Rodgers back, is if McCarthy was brought in to develop the quarterback of the future, which he certainly a large part was, any time spent with a veteran like Aaron Rodgers, by definition, is not helping you achieve that mission of building up that quarterback. Even if you acquired Kyler Murray or Tua, there's at least a chance that McCarthy can work his magic and develop that guy and revive his career. Unlikely as that may be, as disagreeable as that may be, there's certainly a better chance of that happening compared to Aaron Rodgers. Or, of course, if you go with Will Howard, then you have a chance to develop him. So any time, energy spent on Rodgers does not get spent on building up that future. Now, of course, you can still work behind the scenes, and Howard can still learn and be taught by McCarthy, but you have to learn by doing a lot in the NFL, and you miss those opportunities. So if the whole point was McCarthy's here to find the quarterback of the future and build up some of these guys, and your 2026 is spent by not doing that, obviously, then that's kind of a lost year to really move that
Right.
piece forward.
Right. If Aaron Rodgers decides he wants to play in 2026 and he wants to play in Pittsburgh and he's willing to do so on a contract situation similar to the last one that the one that he just had, he's going to be the quarterback of this team, right?
Yes, it would appear so. The only last thing I'll say is is there a chance he could decide to go to, say, Minnesota, a team that didn't pursue him last year? A lot of reports said had Minnesota gotten into the competition or into the fray that he would have signed with Minnesota, return to the NFC North, reunite with good friend Kevin O'Connell, a team that may have a better chance to win, some may argue. That'd be the only other consideration of, is he a lock to come back to Pittsburgh if he chooses to play in 2026?
You would think there's only really two destinations that he could go, right?
Yeah, those are the two, but does he go to the other one? I don't think we've really touched on that topic too much. I think there's at least a chance he would consider going somewhere else. Going to Minnesota.
I think it's one of two places. Period. I'm not gonna say that unequivocally if he decides to come back that it's Pittsburgh or nothing.
But the way that the media is talking about it, it seems like there's two options. Either he retires or comes back to Pittsburgh. I think there's at least a possibility of a third option where he says, I want to come back, but I also want to go to Minnesota.
Sure, I believe that to be. Now, look, I would put the Steelers' chances obviously higher.
Sure, I agree.
But I don't think you could say 0.0 when it comes to Minnesota.
Right, so that's the book on Aaron Rodgers. McCarthy welcoming him back, and now the ball is in Aaron Rodgers' court. Dave, let's move on.
Are you hope? What is your hope?
In terms of what Rodgers decides?
Yeah.
Well, I said before the McCarthy hire that I did not want Rodgers to come back because I didn't think you were going to be able to build on anything. Obviously, with McCarthy, you can still build something by having a returning starter and not having to learn a brand new offense, which makes it a little more attractive. But if you're making me answer, would I prefer Rodgers to be this team's starting quarterback or not, I still would say no, just because, again, going back to the point of if McCarthy's not whole purpose, but certainly a large part of his purpose is to try to work with a young quarterback and develop a quarterback or revive a quarterback or do something to have something to build upon for 2027 and beyond, that time spent with Rodgers does not advance that ball forward. And so just by kind of what the focus of what McCarthy's job is, he's here to try to find that quarterback that can be, someone who can start in 27, because obviously if Rodgers starts in 26, you're starting anew in 2027. So, I wouldn't hate the idea. I get the idea. I said, he's the best option to win now, but I just think in terms of the mission statement of McCarthy spending time and using his background and expertise to build a quarterback, I'd rather go in a different direction in a mission to try to build something.
All right, I agree. What would that other direction look like? Do you think this team unequivocally, if Aaron Rodgers does not play in Pittsburgh in 2026 for whatever reason, how active do you think this team would be in free agency, trade, or the draft?
It's hard to say. We'll have a lot of time to talk about that. They're going to probably explore some other avenues, you would imagine. Again, the pool is pretty thin out there. So I don't know what options they have unless they do want to jump in on Murray or Tua. But if not, then obviously your pool is getting pretty shallow.
And then once again, if you bring in somebody, even though they're probably at least, it's hard to believe that either one of Murray or Tua is your next Sam Darnold, so to speak. But at least
But we said that about Sam Darnold before he was Sam Darnold, just in all fairness.
I'm just saying that at least there is something to work with. Or at least there is some limited hope that one of those two guys could become that guy. But odds are, as is with most in situations, that you're not going to uncover the next Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold type situation. And then if indeed neither of those guys prove to be those guys, then you're saying back in the same situation of not knowing who the other younger, unproven, even though you could flip the conversation to, well, Will Howard is a 6th-round pick. Well, what the hell kind of odds does Will Howard have to be the next franchise quarterback? Well, I will say this, you'll never know if you never get him on the field.
Sure, I get that. Yeah, I want to see him out there at some point just to see what he can do and be given a fair shake, even if that's just preseason games to start. And again, long conversation to be had about this. Could this team pursue Kirk Cousins? You mentioned him. I think
God.
about. I think about McCarthy's resume. He's worked with all kinds of quarterbacks. He's worked with some older quarterbacks later in their careers. Rich Gannon, Steve Bono, Joe Montana was 37 years old, and he'll revive and bring back Montana's career to a Pro Bowl season. Cousins is going to be 38 in August. I'm not calling Kirk Cousins Joe Montana 2.0, obviously, but McCarthy's got a track record of working with these older quarterbacks in that second and third and kind of final act. Could that be attractive to McCarthy? I think all those things are possible.
Sure, I imagine that could be a potential that we hear rumblings about, especially if Aaron makes it known by the middle of March that he's not returning to the Steelers. Would that get me excited? No, but is it plausible? Yes.
Yeah, I'm not advocating for it personally. I'm just talking about what the options are, and the options are going to be pretty broad if Rodgers does not return. But again, a lot of conversations to be had about that. We'll continue to have those over the next weeks and months, and who knows how long until there's some finality with Rodgers and the future of Pittsburgh's quarterback position. Let's move on now, Dave, to the other thing that McCarthy very much ironclad said. He's going to keep Pittsburgh's 3-4 defense. The structure is going to stay the same, at least in kind of that fundamental base, literally and figuratively form, in an odd front 3-4. Not going to be any big changes there.
And not surprising, right? Especially with the personnel that they have on the edge, with the outside linebackers and what they have invested in draft and draft picks so far. I mean, could you make the switch if push come to shove? Yeah, you could. But he even mentioned that's why he went to the 3-4 in Green Bay. It's just been why? What did he say? You're not going to throw the baby out. Use one of our favorites. Not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing, and that includes verbiage and language and all associated.
Yeah, I don't want to say that I was surprised or not surprised by his comment. I just didn't know what his philosophy, his thought was going to be. But he's run a 3-4 before in Green Bay, I think in Dallas as well. And so it's not a shock to see he wants to stick with it. But I think it's a good decision, even though the lines have blurred between 3-4 and 4-3 in this sub-package world and how multiple defenses have to be to match personnel. And Pittsburgh's only in their base 3-4. Probably I got to do the charting still, but about a third of the time, maybe 30% or so, the number kind of ebbs and flows a little bit, 10% or so, give or take, on a given year. There's still a structure to it, and there's still a general scheme to 3-4 versus 4-3. They were going to switch to a 4-3. Somebody like a Nick Herbig was not going to fit as a rush defensive end, so he's probably really happy about that news. There was going to be some meaningful difference depending on what your base philosophy is, and of course, it should be reflected in your D coordinator hire. They're going to have a 3-4 background in all likelihood.
Right. Agreed. And
So-
I'm totally fine, and I wasn't shocked by him saying that.
Yeah, I think it's the right decision. I was happy to hear that for sure. What other big things from the presser, Dave, that stuck out to you?
Focusing on the quarterback comments in general and the athleticism and the West Coast roots and all. What is your reaction to that?
I mean, it's basically been his philosophy to run that West Coast system, from his Green Bay days. You're not taking over directly from Mike Holmgren, but that system was still basically in place whenever McCarthy became the head coach. And so I know some people said, he wants a big athletic quarterback, and that means he doesn't want Rodgers back. He knows Rodgers can run his offense. If there's a quarterback that can run Mike McCarthy's offense, it's Aaron Rodgers. He's had the more strong-arm pocket passer types, not super mobile quarterbacks, Dak Prescott. And, Rodgers was mobile, but obviously, again, still made a bunch of plays from the pocket. So I think that he can certainly still look for that, more strong arm pocket passer. And that's probably one reason why he likes Will Howard. While Howard can show some athleticism and had a bunch of 70-yard runs in college, he's more of a straight line runner, not going to be a super nimble type of a guy, and probably somebody that can fit this offense well.
All right, and he talked about his quarterback background, working with quarterback background, and how Paul Hackett, was a mentor of his, and how he taught him the quarterback position, and how it started at University of Pittsburgh in '89, and says that position is no different than any other position. The quarterback position, to me, is a huge challenge because you don't have the individual time that the other positions have, but finding time, being efficient with your workload capacity, and making sure those guys get the fundamental training. So just never really deviating from his old school way. It's worked for decades, he said.
And he talked about, running the ball is still a pillar of the West Coast system. And in Dallas, they ran the ball a good amount. Now, some of the rushing attempt numbers may be comparatively low to the rest of the NFL because you don't have that quarterback mobility. So you're not scrambling, not calling the occasional design run that kind of fluffs up the rush attempt numbers. But the running backs ran the ball. And so, McCarthy's always talked about associated with quarterbacks and passing game. And obviously, that's very much his background. But there's a desire and goal to run the ball effectively and efficiently as well.
Agreed, and we need to see this offense continue to make yet another step in the running game moving forward. If this offense is going to have any success, regardless of who the quarterback is, and specifically if they have a young guy like Will Howard. And he says, "I'm real excited about Will Howard. I think he's someone that I thought really came on there at Ohio State. I'm anxious to work with him. It will be great to have Aaron back." Almost sounds like a definitive. It would be great to have Aaron back, but and yeah, I'm
Poor
paraphrasing
Mason.
here. And Mason, I'm really excited to get started with those guys. What's Mason think about those comments?
Well, I think he knows his role in the NFL. It's that of a backup, but I think he's a quality number two. I've said that for quite some time. So I think he understands that he is not going to be viewed by anyone in any situation as the future. Now, if Rodgers doesn't return, and if they can't land a more notable name, say in free agency or on the trade market, I don't think Will Howard should just be handed the job. I think you have to
Oh,
battle that out in camp and at least let Mason compete for it. If anything, to just make sure Howard's got a little bit of pressure on him to see how he responds to that and isn't just, handed the keys to this thing. He has not done anything to be handed the keys for, to be deserving of that. So just be given a chance is probably all that Rudolph can hope for. But obviously, when you're looking at your options, Rudolph is who he is, and that's a number two quarterback.
all right, Mike McCarthy will call plays. Show me your shock face.
Yeah, Dave, no surprise at all that McCarthy's going to be the play caller. That was the expectation. It's what he's done in the past. And so I think he's rightfully earned that right to call the offense.
All right. Before, let's see. We got a little. I hope I didn't send the wrong Morse code there, but a little bit of breaking news in the AFC North, right?
We do. The Cleveland Browns have their next head coach. It is Todd Monken, the former Baltimore Ravens offensive coordinator. A bit of a surprise there. The thought was it might be Nate Scheelhaus. It could be a promotion to Jim Schwartz, but it's going to be Monken, who was the Browns OC in 2019, former head coach not in the NFL, but in the college ranks at Southern Miss from 2013 to 2015. So he'll lean on that previous experience in that head chair as the 23rd head coach in Browns history.
And now the question becomes, what will Jim Schwartz think about that? The reports are that they want that he's still under contract with the Browns, but will he want to stay in Cleveland now that he's gotten passed over for the head coach gig and stay with the Browns? That's a question. How surprised are you that Monken is the choice, and did they get this right? I'm going to jump you here. I don't think I think in another year or two, the Browns are going to be looking for another head coach.
That may be true. They did not have a great pool of candidates, and one that was whittling away as people were removing themselves. Mike McDaniel, Grant Udinski, and it really means that for Pittsburgh's standpoint, that Scheelhaus is almost certainly not going to be a head coach this year unless he happens to get the Cardinals or Raiders jobs, the only two open, which I don't believe he's even interviewed for. So I think the NFL realized this guy's still just a little too green for the head job. 2 years in the NFL. It wasn't even about him being 35. It's just a lack of NFL experience. Really, it's too early to kind of make him a head coach. And he may just return to the Rams and maybe go to OC if LaFleur leaves for the Arizona job, which seems like a increasingly likely possibility, and then be a head coach candidate and probably a hot name in 2027. So did they get it right? Probably not. But they had very few options to work with, it felt like.
I don't want to. I don't want to sabotage the talk about going down the path that we're going, and we'll continue on talking about McCarthy and all. But there's a good chance now that both Shieldhouse and Shula don't get head coaching jobs. So what is there to make of that, if anything, when it comes to the Steelers? Rolling it back to the Steelers.
Yeah, I suppose, not suppose, but it would make Pittsburgh look a little bit better. It's not like those guys were scooped up immediately elsewhere. So I understand that view. There were 10 openings this year, which was almost, was there 11? There was 11 openings. Was it 11 openings? How many openings were there this year, Dave? Double digits, either way.
Yeah.
A lot of openings this year, and so it was not a particularly great pool of candidates. There weren't a lot of hot, "Oh, this guy's obviously gonna become a head coach." It really was maybe Harbaugh and Stefanski, the only two that you could take to the bank were gonna get a job somewhere. So, yeah, point well taken. Again, on Shieldhouse, I was never really in on Shieldhouse as head coach because I just felt like it was too early. I was certainly more inclined to look at Chris Shula than I was Shieldhouse. He had a couple interviews. I know Baltimore looked at him pretty good, but of course they went with Jesse Minter, which was no surprise there. So it would maybe speak a little more favorably in terms of the optics of Pittsburgh, but ultimately it just matters. Does McCarthy do a good job or not? If he does a good job, it's a great hire. If he fails, then obviously it's a bad hire.
And I know I'm already getting, or have gotten, some questions on Twitter, and I think in the email as well too. What is the possibility of Nate Shieldhouse becoming the Steelers' offensive coordinator? For starters, usually you're able to build, new head coaches come in, and you see them build their staffs around people that they know or have worked with before. Now we're going to talk a little bit about one guy that's an offensive coordinator candidate for the Steelers here, who didn't necessarily follow that path with Mike McCarthy in Dallas. But it goes without saying too that if LaFleur ends up leaving the Rams to get the Cardinals head job, that Shieldhouse would slide right in as the OC with the Rams there. So is it unpossible that Shieldhouse becomes the Steelers' new OC? Uh, In short, no, but it's very unlikely that that's going to happen.
Yeah, I would put it at almost a 0% chance. Why would he leave to go to Pittsburgh where he still would not be the play caller? And even if he gets the OC role with the Rams, he may not be the primary play caller, but it's a better roster. You're still working with McVay. It's a much more attractive situation to just stay than to go to Pittsburgh with all the uncertainty at quarterback there. So, no, you're not going to get the hot name at OC when you hire an offensive-minded coach like Mike McCarthy who's going to call the plays.
All right, and it does, and whether or not it's the right or wrong decision, it does, like you said, at least make the optics look better when it comes to the Steelers hiring uh, Mike McCarthy and not getting one of the two guys from the Rams who potentially are not going to be head coaches this year.
Yeah, my whole thing was not to sit there and say that you had to go hire one of those two guys when I criticized Pittsburgh's process and how quick things felt in an article earlier this week. It was just about getting all the information possible before making your hire to at least know what those guys could bring to the table in a more expansive in-person interview that's more connected than Zoom, which is more difficult, I think, for guys to make that good impression in. McCarthy never had the Zoom interview, of course, had only the in-person face-to-face meeting. So yeah, I think my point still stands about the process, but obviously, again, optically, Pittsburgh may look a bit better with those guys seemingly staying with the Rams.
Okay, back to McCarthy now. We covered him calling plays. What else? He was asked about what's his timetable for offensive coordinator, any coaching staff. Are they going to be people you're familiar with from your past or around the league? He says definitely. Now, is that definitely meaning going to be people that you're familiar with from your past or around the league? I would suppose that's what he meant. He says, I will call the plays on offense and obviously will run the offense, but these coaching staffs. It's a bigger challenge each and every year. I think there's more moving parts to it, but it's been very fluid in the last 48 hours. And obviously, we've got a couple of at least names attached to people he's considering, correct?
Right, yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. Already the names popping up have certainly strong ties to Mike McCarthy. He gave a good answer on what he's looking for in a coaching staff and sort of the balance of a coaching staff. He says, quote, "There's four areas that I've looked at. Number one, you've got to have experts. You got to have men who know the league. This league evolves. You definitely want to be on the front end of that cycle. I think it's important to look at the current coaching staff in place. Lots of good coaches that were here in place under Mike Tomlin. The third one is you got to look at some of these young and new ideas out there that would fit the direction you want to go with your team. And then you got to have them young dudes. You got to have the guys that grind." And so it's kind of the layer of the experts, the current staff, the innovators, younger guys, and then kind of the grunt work, quality control type guys who have come in and kind of cut their teeth that way. So McCarthy, again, I think he's certainly capable of building a good staff. He's done that before. He's got a lot of connections, been in the NFL for a long time. We'll see what the quality of the staff obviously looks like whenever it starts getting officially assembled, but the potential is there. I think McCarthy certainly knows what to look for when it comes to assembling a coaching staff.
Right. And we expect most, if not all, to have ties to McCarthy.
The vast majority, I'm sure, in some form or fashion, and again, the names that are already filtering in do have that. Again, we'll talk about that here in just one moment. Anything else from McCarthy's presser? Did you have any takeaways from the players who did attend or the ones who did not attend? There were two current Steelers who were at the press conference, and linebacker Alex Highsmith and cornerback Joey Porter Jr., some trying to read into TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, others not being there. Do you have any impressions on that?
I will say that would I have liked to have seen more current Steelers there? Answer's yes. Do I understand why there were so few? Well, I don't have their whole itineraries in the offseason, as even McCarthy says, a decompressed time. Uh, I Cam Hayward's in Pittsburgh, right? It does kind of make you wonder why Cam Hayward was not there. But outside of that, look, I mean, TJ Watt's probably back with his family in Wisconsin. Who knows where a lot of these other guys are at right now? Maybe they had already plans and trips, because this is obviously, if you're not in the playoffs at this time, this is the time that you get away from it all and have a vacation and all like that. So, in a word, was I stunned that there was not more there? No. In a word, would I have liked to have seen more there? Yes.
I take it as it is. I don't think there's any expectation of who shows up and who doesn't. I'm not sure if former players were showing up to, or current players were showing up to Stefanski's presser yesterday. Maybe there were. I just hadn't seen anything. I know a handful showed up for Jeff Hafley's presser in Miami, but I take zero stock into trying to guess at who didn't attend. Because as you said, I'm sure Watt is back home at Wisconsin. Hayward's in Pittsburgh, but could he be on vacation? Certainly could be. Also, this guy still does not even know if he's going to play in 2026. Right. I would not expect him to be there for the presser. He's still digesting 2 weeks ago Mike Tomlin stepping down. It's still probably pretty raw for him. It's interesting. Hayward had his podcast today. It's not just football podcast. It was recorded post McCarthy hire, but they really did not talk about the McCarthy hire. Only mentioned it one time in a grand view of the coaching carousel and where things stood. So read into that what you will. But him not being there is totally fine. Again, guys are all over the place this time of year. They're out of the country. They're out of the state. They're on vacation. They're back home, whatever the case is. What does it mean that Highsmith and Porter were there? I don't know. Just maybe show support, show a good faith. Porter saying, "Hey, I'm doing all the right things. Go pay me that money this offseason. I'm here. I'm here for you, coach." Maybe that. But I put very little stock into it all.
Will it be talked about and written about? Yes. Is it a big deal in the grand scheme of things as we sit here in late January? No.
Well said. It'll be forgotten very soon here as the offseason gets underway. Any other takeaways from the McCarthy presser or what Omar Khan and Art Rooney had to say as well?
Well, Art Rooney and Omar really didn't say a lot. I'm with you. I was surprised. It was I mean, it was barely the length. If you add up all the time that McCarthy talked, and even and if you excluded his opening statement, which we already knew about, he talked 23 minutes or something like that. And the whole press conference, I think, clocked in right at 32 minutes, and that included Bert at the end telling people that they're going to have a photo session and all like that. I was, but didn't you even write that Tomlin's start to finish was like 21 or 22 minutes or something like that?
Right. His was
when,
21 and 07. Yeah, they varied. Harbaugh's was only 25, so this was longer. Halfley's was 58. Stefanski's 43 minutes. So those guys had some other people to introduce. The new GM in Miami, Matt Ryan in Atlanta. So it's nitpicking. It just felt a little bit shorter than I expected.
All right. The last question McCarthy was asked about. He's had a lot of star receivers like Jordy and CeeDee Lamb, and as he looks at the current state of the wide receivers and the tight end and running back room, what stands out to you? Maybe to add a new type of receivers to fit what you do schematically. And McCarthy says, well, I just think like any coach, you're supposed to look at what you have and you look at the opportunity to develop. As far as the receiver position as a whole, we were at our best in Green Bay, the Jordy Nelson era, because all those guys worked so well together. This game's about matchups. He goes on to talk about put your third receiver on your third cornerback and favorable matchups and move those guys around. You want your receivers to be able to play all three positions. When you can have the flexibility of that goes back to the first statement about making quarterbacks successful, because the quarterbacks are trained in conceptual development of how you throw the football, so that helps with your footwork training. But if you have 900 plays just to beat every defense, that's very difficult on a quarterback. So if you truly want to play to rhythm and time of a quarterback, your perimeter guys being able to play multiple positions is very important. So that will be our approach with these guys. I'm looking forward to getting started with them. Look, that looks good written out in a transcript and all like that, and it should be the right approach, but it's not anything groundbreaking there. You obviously, and we've seen this in the past, and not just in Pittsburgh, but elsewhere, you want to have your receiver room cross-trained as much as possible for your X to play to Z and your Z to play to Y, or your X play to Y and all like that. Now, how much you can get that accomplished obviously depends on the group of players that you have. So as a whole, what he said, was it shocking? No. Now just let's go out and see if he can accomplish that.
Right. You know, this team's going to lean on more receivers than it did under Arthur Smith, be a little more open, be a little more spread out, get those guys the ball more. And so that'll be reflected in, I'm sure, how this team attacks free agency in the draft, but not a whole lot to glean from that answer from McCarthy, I didn't think.
All right, me either. What else from this?
I think that was basically it. We covered pretty much every answer. Khan willingly talked about working together with McCarthy in 2000 in New Orleans, a point we made from the get-go when he first suggested Mike McCarthy, the ties between him and Andy Weidel and all three working together that season in New Orleans. And then Rooney just saying it was the obvious hire, that he was the guy. They interviewed him. They knew he was the right guy, so there was no need to wait, and they offered him on Saturday.
This, going back to the process and all, this does feel like it was the moment. It feels like this was Mike McCarthy's job the moment that Mike Tomlin decided not to come back. The Anthony Weaver and Brian Flores in persons were to satisfy the Rooney rule. The virtuals of the other younger head coaches just seemed like, fact-finding missions and more than anything. But at its whole, looking back at everything now, this was Mike McCarthy's job the moment that Mike Tomlin stepped down.
I think at least it was his job to lose, that somebody else was going to have to blow the team away, a la Tomlin in 07, or McCarthy was going to have to really struggle in his interview and candidacy process for this team to go in a different direction. And clearly, neither of those two things occurred.
All right, and as far as the longevity thing, Mike McCarthy's not limiting himself to just being a temporary head coach in Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah, he says he loves coaching, that he's invigorated, that having the year off helped him spend time with family, which was very important, but then kind of, had him eager to jump back into the NFL. And frankly, if he didn't get hired by Pittsburgh this time around, he was probably never going to be a head coach again. If you're out for 2 cycles, you're going to be 63 years old next year. Pittsburgh obviously has their head coach in place the next at least, 3, 4, 5 years had they hired anybody else. You weren't getting another head job. I just find that very unlikely. So this was kind of it. And I think that's also one reason why it was so emotional for Mike McCarthy, because this was kind of do or die if he was ever going to get a third chance as an NFL head coach. That Pittsburgh was either going to hire him or he may never coach again. Certainly not in a head lead role. And so that probably made that decision and that offer all the more impactful.
Agreed. This is going to be his last stop.
Yeah, certainly for now. No question that Pittsburgh's going to be the last place he's head coach, and hopefully that's for a long time. Could it be a decade? It could be, but get through the first 5 years of the contract, and if he does a good job, he'll probably get extended out, a year ahead of time. He does not want to go down lame duck status 2.0, which is what happened that last year in 24 in Dallas. So we'll take it 1 year at a time, though, and go from there.
What does he need? What does he need to accomplish in his first 4 seasons of being a head coach so that he doesn't become a lame duck head coach? What does he need to accomplish in Pittsburgh to ensure that he goes longer and then does, because an extension would probably come in his heading into his 4th season, correct?
Yeah, a year out. They won't. Pittsburgh does. No, most teams don't want to put guys in lame dog status. Dallas was a rare exception. He needs to find a franchise quarterback. It's pretty black and white. Obviously, want to keep the defense still intact and a solid group, and you're going to have to probably reimagine that defense as it continues to age out. But the goal is finding a franchise quarterback.
How far does he have to advance in the playoffs on top of all that? Should the expectations be at a minimum he reaches an AFC championship game within 4 years?
I mean, that's always one of your goals. I mean, a goal is to win your division. That's kind of where
Sure.
this thing always starts. So in terms of what your chart and your path is, that's always where it begins. Win your division, which Pittsburgh has done an exceptionally good job of. They've gone 500 or better in the AFC North every single year since 2010. That's easily the longest active streak in the NFL by a country mile. And so that's where it begins. I don't want to sit there and lay it out in such black and white terms. He has to reach this point to get an extension. There's so much that will happen along the way that will dictate. But if you find a franchise quarterback, all those doors really start to open up generally, where you're going to be competitive, competing for your division, winning your division, making a playoff run, etc. So do that, and the rest, in a sense, takes care of itself.
All right, he needs to win a playoff game. How about that?
Yeah, that's a start at the very least. Franchise quarterback or not, the goal and expectation is going to be high. The expectation is not to rebuild and take a year off. It's going to be to still compete for this thing. And if you can win a playoff game, it's going to give you a lot of good grades from this fan base. Not that that's the ultimate goal, but it's going to be getting over that hump. It's going to stop the drought. It's going to stop the stats and you and I talking about how long ago it was since they last won a postseason game. So that's going to be a really important first step.
All right, shall we talk about the coordinators?
Well, just quickly, now that the AFC North is full, every coach has been hired. Go back to the question we posed on, I think it was Monday, does Pittsburgh have the best coach in the AFC North?
Well, based on what we know right now, I don't know if I'd put him best because of what's happening there with Zach Taylor in Cincinnati. I think Zach Taylor is a good coach.
Better than Mike McCarthy?
I think he's more I would say short answer, yes.
I'll say no. I'll say McCarthy's better than Zach Taylor if I was ranking the head coaches.
Okay. Do I have him far behind Zach Taylor? No.
So second best, you would say. Above. Obviously, Minter is an unknown. He may be a very good coach. I really like Jesse Minter. I was certainly interested in hiring him, but it's just hard to rank him because he's never been a head coach before. Todd Monk had never been an NFL head coach. He's been, I think, an okay OC, but this feels like a pretty uninspired hire over in Cleveland.
I would bet they feel the same right now. If Aaron Rodgers comes back for 2026, would you say the Steelers are the favorites to win the AFC North?
In terms of how the national media will perceive it, or my own personal belief in selection?
All right, both.
Probably no to both. I think certainly Baltimore and Cincinnati will get more national love in the sense of Burrow's going to be back and he's going to be healthy and they're going to add some pieces defensively and they're going to figure this thing out. And Baltimore's still got a strong, well, not a strong roster. There's certainly work to be done there. But again, same thing. Lamar, healthy Lamar. They're going to new head coach, defensive minded Minter to really help that defense. They're going to get a lot more love. Where do I come in? Again, it's even with Rodgers in place hypothetically. What does the rest of the roster look like? It's so hard to judge those things, but no, I would not. I would probably not be picking Pittsburgh to win the division, even if Rodgers returns.
All right, from where we sit right now, I think the national media will say no. Personally, I do think if Aaron Rodgers comes back, that they should potentially be the favorites to win the North based on way things are now. Now, I get through March in the draft. Obviously, my opinion could change there. I think unequivocally, though, if they don't have Aaron Rodgers, the answer in both the national media and my mind would be no.
Okay, fair enough. One other piece of front office news that we should note, Andy Weidl was not at the press conference yesterday. He probably was down in Mobile for the start of the Senior Bowl. Ross McCorkle is down there too, by the way. And we got to thank Ross. He was in Nashville. They had that terrible ice storm. His power was off. It's been a tough couple of days. His power came back, though, I think late Monday. And so he drove down Tuesday to make it in time for the first practice. So looking forward to his coverage. But Andy Weidl is likely to stay in Pittsburgh. The Atlanta Falcons, who he interviewed for their GM job, brought in or will bring in 2 finalists this week, and Weidl is not one of them. So barring something unforeseen, Weidl should be back as assistant GM in 2026.
All right, that's good news at its core.
And one other just shoehorn front office note: this was going to be the story of the Monday podcast until McCarthy was hired. Pittsburgh apparently hired or is hiring Tim Gribble to be a front office scout of some sort. We don't know exactly what his title is going to be. He was formerly of the, where is he from? Washington, I believe, right? He was the director of college personnel there. So he will have some sort of role in Pittsburgh. That was initially a sign of, could that mean that Weidl is leaving and they're trying to hire some extra help in the front office? But Weidl now seems likely to stay, and Pittsburgh will add another experience and hometown kid. He's from Pittsburgh in Tim Gribble.
And he should be easy to spot in the Blues Clues portions, right?
Yeah, assuming he's on the Pro Day trail. He seems like a recognizable man, so we'll be looking for him for sure.
All right. Where to from here? Coordinators now,
yeah,
finally?
Let's get I know, yeah, they're like a kid on Christmas. I'm making you wait till you open your presents, Dave. We know our first 2 coordinator candidates, for actually 3 of them, for the OC and DC job for the offensive coordinator position. Dallas Cowboys tight ends coach Lunda Wells will interview on Thursday. That was initially reported by ESPN's Adam Schefter, but our Josh Carney had a great one-on-one interview with Wells last night. Wells was the head coach of the West team for the East-West Shrine Bowl. The West won that game, and so Josh talked to Coach Wells down there, and he gave a little more information about the interview. It'll be Thursday. It'll be virtual, and he kind of made his pitch for why he is a good candidate for the Steelers OC. Also getting some looks from Washington, and the Jets will interview Lunda Wells as well. So that is the first OC name in the mix.
All right. Obviously, he talked about McCarthy not having worked with him before, yet bringing him on as part of that Cowboys staff. So I think there's, at least there's an option there, and you could see it going down that path. I would expect to hear a couple other names, obviously thrown out there in this later on this week as well too, when it comes to that. So what about the other candidates here?
Well, just quickly with Wells, longtime coach. He's been coaching since I think 2006, even though he's only 42 years old. Started out high school, worked his way up, got into the NFL, has been a tight ends coach for the last 7 or so years, first with the Giants in 2018, 2019, and then, as you said, hired by McCarthy in McCarthy's first year in Dallas in 2020. He's done really good work with Dalton Schultz, who got paid by Houston. Jake Ferguson got a big extension last year in Dallas. And he was also an offensive line coach before becoming a tight ends coach. And I like kind of the all perspectives he's had working with the offensive line and then working with tight ends, and especially with tight ends, because they have to know the entire offense. Got to be able to run block, pass block, obviously run routes, catch the ball. They know the offense basically as well as anybody who's not the quarterback. And so I kind of like that all worlds perspective. And then it kind of plays off of McCarthy's background, which is pass game, quarterbacks. You have now Wells, who's got offensive line background, tight end background, kind of a different flair to his offensive focus that I think will probably match well. So never been an OC before. Obviously will not be calling the plays in Pittsburgh, so the OC hire matters a bit less than the DC hire, but Wells is that first candidate. Pittsburgh will still have to go through the process. The Rooney Rule mandates 2 interviews with minority candidates. Wells would be one of them. They'd have to interview at least somebody else, and so this thing's still going to probably take some time for any decisions to get made, probably into next week, but Wells is that first known candidate.
All right, and as you stated, it gives you a perspective of a guy that's coached O-line, tight ends. He prides himself as a teacher, as one that likes to connect with the players as well too. So, and I think he was an add-on to your one of the and also when running down the potential 20-something whatever names that you listed in your staff kind of prediction overview.
Yeah, he was mentioned at the very end. I wasn't sure if he was going to go to OC or be a more lateral move, which Dallas could have blocked. But if it is OC, then obviously Pittsburgh could not block that opportunity. And again, he'll interview virtually on Thursday. On the defensive side, we know 2 candidates. One is Patrick Graham. The other is Jason Simmons. Graham, a longtime D coordinator, most recently the last 4 years with the Las Vegas Raiders. And then Simmons worked with McCarthy in Green Bay for a long time as a secondary coach. Graham also worked with McCarthy in 2018. Graham was the linebackers coach and the run game coordinator in that last season before McCarthy was fired midway through. So both those guys have connections, and Simmons has a bunch of connections to Pittsburgh. He was a Steeler for 4 seasons in the late 90s, early 2000s as defensive back. It was kind of a backup, I believe. And then he's been a long-time coach. He spent the last 2 years as the Commanders pass game coordinator, I think also working with a secondary there. So Simmons and Graham, 2 candidates for that all-important DC hire.
All right. Feels like, at least at this point, based on the names that are out there, Graham's the leader in the clubhouse.
Yeah, but still want to go through the search. Again, I think both would fulfill and satisfy the Rooney Rule, so you could hire either of the 2 right after you interview whoever that second person is. I'm so mad I missed on Simmons. He was not on my list, and the dots were easy to connect. I don't think I ever saw his name. I just probably you get run through so many names. It was like
Right.
midnight, and you just missed them there. But that would make sense. Now, Graham and Simmons would probably not be the most exciting hires.
Right.
Graham's track record in terms of how his defenses have done have been generally poor. The occasional success. He's not had a lot of talent to work with, I don't think, but it's not going to be this big name, great, Jim Schwartz with this awesome track record hire. And Simmons, the Commanders DBs were not particularly good this year. How much can you blame that on the coach is obviously up for debate, but neither would be big like home run perceived hires. I do like Graham. I want to learn more about him, obviously, but that was somebody that I've had my eye on from the get-go.
All right. And props to our Josh Carney for doing the work last night, going down from the press box after the game to talk to Wells.
Yeah, that was a great job by him for getting the scoop and getting the story. Some other coaching news. While McCarthy did not talk in too much depth about what coaches could be retained and who is leaving. We already know a couple that had left or were leaving, and Danny Smith and Anthony Midget and Arthur Smith. We know Terrell Austin looked for the Commander's job. He did not get it, so he will not be the Commander's DC, but probably will not be returning to Pittsburgh either. It sounds like Carl Dunbar will not return either. That was a CBS report yesterday that Dunbar will not be retained by Mike McCarthy. It may be news to Carl Dunbar because, as our Ross McCorkle pointed out, Dunbar was at the Senior Bowl wearing Steelers gear, so it probably just means what else does he know where he's still technically a Steeler,
Right.
just where something represents that you're in the NFL so people know kind of what you're doing there. But it sounds like Dunbar, longtime D-line coach, will not return.
And look, he's probably down there networking. It's a networking situation for coaches down there as well too. So I don't know if he was he probably did know, but it's not uncommon for him to still be in the gear that from the last team that he's with, but it does indeed sound like he's not returning in 2026.
Yeah, I said that a little tongue in cheek because I'm sure he's been informed. Again, you just got to wear something down there. It's the gear that you have, and it's all that really matters. Is that the right decision? Would you like to see Dunbar return?
I think it's time for some fresh blood in there.
Me too. I mean, individually, I think he's done a good job developing some of these guys. And Keanu Benton, the big breakout year in 2025. I thought Harmon developed. Y.A. Black obviously has a tutelage of guys like Stephon Tuitt, Javon Hargrave. But I think it probably is just time. It kind of reminds me of the offensive line. Like individually, there was some development, but how well did the group play collectively in terms of being gap sound in their assignment? Playing good, solid team run defense. It was just too inconsistent. It wasn't terrible. It just was too hit and miss for where this team's expectations were at. He's been here 8 years, done a lot of good work. He's a quality coach. I'm sure he'll find work elsewhere if he chooses to continue coaching. But I think it's probably time for somebody different in that role.
Yeah, new eyes and new hands on things. Yep.
Now, will that impact Cam Hayward's decision? Because Hayward not only has lost Mike Tomlin, he's also losing apparently his D-line coach. And we talk so much about he's only played for one head coach in his entire career, which is certainly a remarkable, very rare feat. He's only ever had two positional coaches, Dave, John Mitchell and Carl Dunbar.
Right.
And to play 15 years with two positional coaches, I'm not sure if you could find any other player that can say that. And so that is a remarkable feat. And obviously that probably hits home for Hayward to lose a guy that he's worked with for the past 8 years.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, and that's going to be a prime focal point between now and the draft is waiting for Cam Hayward to say, "Look, I'm coming back," or not.
And maybe we'll find more about his status. He's going to be on Super Bowl Radio Row next week. He's going to have an interview with Rich Eisen show on Wednesday, and then, of course, have his own podcast and be down there for the Super Bowl, where I'm sure he'll be talking about his future and probably have to talk about the McCarthy hire more, because, again, on his podcast that dropped this morning, he barely mentioned it. So maybe we'll get some more information next week.
All right.
One other piece of Steelers coaching news, the Cowboys interviewed Denzel Martin for their linebackers job. Martin's been the outside linebackers coach in Pittsburgh the last 5+ years, and so that could be another assistant that may not be returning in 2026.
If you had your druthers, would you want him back?
With Pittsburgh keeping the 3-4, I think it's fine. I mean, it wasn't one of the two guys that I'm kind of banging the table for. That was Faulkner and Gerald Alexander. Martin's been a really high-energy guy. He's a pretty young guy. Obviously, he's gotten to work with some really good talent, which always makes a coach look good. But keeping the 3-4, if Martin wanted to return, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I would be on board with it, but I in the same breath there, it probably wouldn't hurt to have some new eyes and hands on that edge group.
Yeah, I mean, the group's been really good. Sawyer developed well. Herberg's developed well. I mean, I think Martin's done a good job. If he goes to Dallas, it's not going to stop the internet chatter of Nick Herbig ending up as a Cowboy at some point. There've been a lot of people trying to force those dots to connect there. So we'll see what Herbig's future is. Obviously, he's still under contract for 2026, so he's not going to be going anywhere, you wouldn't think, in 2026, especially with Pittsburgh staying in their base 3-4.
Yeah, I don't see why you'd want to get rid of any one of those guys. The only one really that I could foresee being traded or being out of that group would be T.J. Watt, and only if T.J. Watt says, "I want out of here." That to me, anything other than bringing that room back intact, to me is just foolish talk.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, that's one of maybe the only group that's like intact that you can just bring back, set it, forget it, and be good to go with Watt, Highsmith, and Herbig and Sawyer. So probably nothing's going to change there.
Agreed.
All right. Any other news and notes that I might be missing, Dave? Obviously, you can hear for any more candidates for the coordinators. Probably hear some more by the time we reconvene on Friday. Maybe some early talk on positional coaches, but you want to get the coordinators in place too.
All right. Time to talk about our friends at MyBookie, right?
Well, let me ask you just really quickly. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it is the NFL hot topic. Bill Belichick is not going to make the Hall of Fame. He, in a very surprising piece of news, announced yesterday that he missed the 40 votes needed to make the Hall. I think that has one relevant point from Pittsburgh's perspective. I think that increases the chance that L.C. Greenwood is going to make the Hall of Fame, which we both agree is very long overdue, and be very happy if Greenwood got in. But what are your thoughts on Belichick apparently being snubbed?
Like everybody else, I was surprised. How much does the whole Spygate play into this? How much does the Spygate, along with head coaches only having to be out 1 year, and people saying, well, he should, because of Spygate, at least have to, there's a lot of avenues. Here's the thing. Everybody's pointing their fingers at or raising their hands. It wasn't me, here's the overarching question. Should the votes be at least exposed for people to have to answer to them?
Absolutely. 100% unequivocally, they should be public. I know some may argue against and say there could be almost this I don't know, chilling effect where people won't truly vote how they want to vote because they'll vote how it's going to get perceived, and that could be an issue, but they should be public. They should be open. That's common for a lot of other Hall of Fame ballots, I think baseball, for example. So it can be open itself up to criticism, but it should be a transparent process. The vote should be public.
And if they're a dissenter from the mass, then at least they should be prepared to have the public forum of explaining why. And maybe they've got some great reasons there. But I think All Pro and Hall of Fame, I think we should be able to see those votes. And I think the panel of voters should also be rotated out every other year or whatever, when it comes to that.
And if you can't defend your vote, then you should not have the right to vote in the first place. If you can't confidently sit there and explain calmly and reasonably and logically why you voted a certain way, then you don't get the right to be in that chair in the first place. For as much as Steeler fans will dislike Bill Belichick on a personal level, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. There's no debate about that. With that resume there, if this is punishment for Spygate, then that's just silly personal grudges. If you want to sit there and say you should never get in the Hall of Fame because of Spygate, that's, I think, a more valid case than trying to punish him for a season and send a message. The Hall has done that before with T.O. and now with Belichick, and that's just some petty stuff that should not happen.
Yeah, and then, Belichick wasn't great with the media as a whole either, so you wonder how much pushback is because some beat writer got his feelings hurt.
Yeah, pretty crazy stuff there. So we'll get the Hall of Fame announcement this weekend, and we'll just cross our fingers that LC gets in and Art Rooney Jr. as well. And I just hope if Greenwood gets in, it's not met with backlash as the guy that prevented Belichick from getting in. That will be disappointing if that's the reaction. Obviously, this is not Greenwood's, who died in 2013, his fault at all. He's deserving to get in the Hall of Fame, and people did not vote for Greenwood because they thought he was a better candidate if they didn't vote for Belichick. It was just probably because they had that grudge against Belichick. So point is, Greenwood should be celebrated, even if the perception is that he's the one that, quote unquote, took Belichick's spot.
Right, and I like his chances too. So we'll see how that goes here this next few days.
All right, Dave, as you said before we get to reader emails, let's hear from our friends over at MyBookie.
Yeah, MyBookie's been a long time sponsor of the Terrible Podcast, especially in season on Fridays when Alex and I do our picks, and we're pleased to have them 3 times a week as a sponsor throughout the playoffs and throughout the Super Bowl here. And the Super Bowl is finally here, and MyBookie is where you turn your bets into a bankroll, and a big one. Everybody's watching, everybody's got to take, and this is the one game where the props matter just as much as the score. And look, we're going to be having our prop contest that we do annually up on the site here right before the Super Bowl gets underway. But why wait until then? Put your money where your mouth is and get in on some of these props lines that are already up on MyBookie. I use MyBookie. I enjoy their service and have for years as well too. Their Super Bowl prop board is deep and fun to play. It's the same reason they get talked about even on the Jimmy Kimmel Live show every year when the game rolls around. If there was ever a time to get in and get established at MyBookie, it's right now. One account, one wallet. You can bet the spread, live bet the second half of games, hit the casino during commercials, and it all lives in one place. And not only football, they have obviously NHL, NBA basketball, college basketball. If it's sports, you can bet on it there, and along with taking part in their casino portion of their website. It all lives in one place at MyBookie. If you go to mybookie.ag right now and you're a first-time user, use our promo code TERRIBLE at sign-up, and you can get your first bet covered up to $500. That means if your first bet doesn't hit, you can use your bet back bonus token and run that bet back again. So don't just watch the big game a couple of weeks from now. Make it pay for you, and make it pay for you with MyBookie. And you get there at mybookie.ag. And once again, if you're a first-time user, make sure to use promo code TERRIBLE at sign up to take advantage of the bet back bonus program that they have going on for new users.
All right, Dave, let's get to some reader emails and close out today's show.
All right, I'm going to have to sort through. I just lost my spot here when it comes to some of this, so bear with me just a moment.
And, by the way, Ross McCorkle's in Mobile and says that LSU quarterback Garrett Nussmeier, he says, quote, I would love to play for the Steelers and Coach McCarthy. And there's some ties there. Mike McCarthy has worked with his Garrett's dad, Doug Nussmeier, who's the current OC of the Saints. So that's a name that'll probably be talked about a little bit come draft time.
All right, let's get into the emails here. We will start with, how about Mario Brunel? He says, good day, gents. Have we considered that maybe the team didn't simply take McCarthy's word and PowerPoint on if he's helped develop? Did we answer this? No, I don't think. Did we answer
No, I
this
don't think
one?
so. Sounds new.
Word and PowerPoint on if he developed quarterbacks. Maybe they talked to said quarterbacks and others who McCarthy worked with to help inform their decision. Just saying. He says also maybe McCarthy will help develop his successor on staff like a Tom Arth. This may help minimize the impact of him being an older hire than the team has previously had. He says Tomlin did not have a succession plan. I know the hire isn't sexy, but it could set up the team for long-term success if played properly. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm sure they didn't just like blindly take his word for it. They knew about his resume, his background, did their own research. What outside sources did they speak to? That would be a good question for the presser yesterday. I wish it was asked, but it was not. Yeah, I don't know, but it wasn't just like they blindly accept every single thing that he says. They probably were pretty well aware of his resume to begin with. I don't really buy the whole successor plan thing because if you have an OC that does a really good job, he'll be hired away before McCarthy's done coaching by another team to be head coach somewhere in all likelihood. So I don't really kind of buy the whole successor plan.
All right, let's see here. Let's get to Beth Weaver here. I would like to hear you guys explain why Will Howard fell to the sixth round, why he could succeed and why he could fail. To me, once a quarterback falls out of the second round, it's just a prioritizing situation that continues to fall. Great show all year long. Beth, I mean, this obviously goes all the way back to the draft in and of itself. Alex, where'd you have him ranked? I know I had Will Howard ranked as around a third round guy. And then you had guys like Shadur Sanders and the other, who's the other Browns quarterback?
Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah, Dylan Gabriel go before him, and several others obviously went before him as well too. Why did he fall to the sixth round? That is an impossible question to answer, and why he could succeed and why he could fail. Look, I mean, here's the thing, and I think Charlie Batch has got some pushback over some things that he has said. And he kind of lays it out as well. You know, Tom Brady was a 6th round draft pick, and Antonio Brown was a 6th round draft pick. And he knows it just because you have examples of Brady and AB out there, and several others who were drafted late. I mean, look at obviously Brock Purdy and all. Do guys fall through the cracks at time? Absolutely. Do I know exactly why Will Howard fell to the 6th round according to per 32 teams? Absolutely, I don't. But look, I take McCarthy at his word that Will Howard is somebody that he's excited to work with. Does merely putting Will Howard in the process mean absolutely anything compared? I mean, when it comes to potentially finding the next diamond in the rough, no. But just letting him sit there and take an occasional rep as a second or third team quarterback, him going through how many snaps do you kind of remember Will Howard getting during camp?
I can maybe give
Roughly.
you. I might be able to give you the exact answer. Give me a
All
second
right.
here, because I normally track quarterback reps, and I believe I did so this year. So that this only will be for team periods, not individual or
Okay.
7-on-7 and those types of things. Obviously, so just full disclosure as I go to look up the number. Do I have reps for the entire year? As I'm stalling to try to find where my notes are at. I have him over 93 reps for all of training
Okay.
camp.
And then obviously didn't play in the preseason. So you've seen a lot more Will Howard. You've seen nearly 100 team rep snaps more of Will Howard than I have, going off of his college tape and all like that. Here's the thing. You don't know what you what you have or don't have until you get a longer look at him. And at a very minimum, we expect Will Howard to play a lot during the preseason. And even that, as we learned with Kenny Pickett, does not does not mean a damn thing. But look, I mean, at a minimum, you got to find out more about this guy, and you got to find out more about this guy under a quarterback whisperer light guy in Mike McCarthy.
To the core question of why did he fall, as Dave said, it's hard to give a perfect answer to say exactly why he fell. It was not viewed as a strong quarterback class overall. Other teams had some different, I think, flavors and guys they favored. The physical tools are not immense with Will Howard, despite being a really big body and built and kind of prototypical old school quarterback build. He's not have a real big arm. His arm strength is just probably average, and ability to kind of really get RPMs on the ball and drive. It's going to be a question and a concern. It was one of my chief concerns with him coming out of Ohio State. Some may have knocked him for benefiting from all the great talent Ohio State had. Some may have knocked him for not being a high-end mobile quarterback. He kind of has that Daniel Jones athleticism, has good straight line speed, can run on the line, but not going to have a whole lot of wiggle and explosiveness, beyond just kind of that straight line speed. So those are probably some factors of why Howard fell to the late day 3.
He does have a good constitution overall, for whatever that's worth, and for him to bounce back like he did in his last season after those losses, and like he did. Now, look, was he a benefit of a good program at Ohio State? Absolutely. But I mean, look, for me to sit here, and a lot of people probably want us to say, what kind of upside does he? I think we got another question in here about what kind of what is his upside compared to, say, a guy like Malik Willis right now? Well, look, we have a lot more, albeit not much, but we have more tape on Malik Willis actually succeeding in the NFL outside of Tennessee. So would you put Malik Willis's upside higher than Will Howard's at this point right now? I unequivocally, I think you would, because you obviously know more about Malik Willis in a different NFL situation, and he has had some limited success there. I have not seen Will Howard take a snap other than prep for games in a Steeler uniform since his time at Ohio State. And once again, I want to make sure I say that, look, I'm not saying that just give Will Howard unequivocally can be your quarterback of the future, but if they don't go out and get a free agent or cast off, and let's say whatever happens with Murray or Tua, and Aaron Rodgers doesn't come back, I am hoping that they lean in heavily on Will Howard in 2026 to find out what he is, what he isn't, and if you come out of it kind of murky and say, there was some good, there was some bad in 2026, and then hopefully you can make plans to get a better prospect in the 2027 draft.
There's upside there. I think you're right. You probably have to tip the scale to Will just because you've gotten to see more of him. But I think Howard has upside, the starter potential. It's just a big bummer that you couldn't get any sort of read into that his rookie year because of the injury, and by not having the Week 18 game mean nothing. Where you probably could have gotten Howard some snaps and just gotten some sort of baseline look at him and some in-stadium experience in that perspective that would have been key. So yeah, I mean, there's upside with him, no question. I mean, I think I was really impressed with Howard coming out. I was surprised to see him fall. I certainly had him much higher than a 6th-round candidate. So yeah, I want to get him into a stadium this summer and take it from there. Was there news?
We have our first hiring of a staff member. Cameron Wolf of the NFL Network is saying the Steelers are hiring Adam Henry as their new receivers coach. Henry is a longtime receivers coach who has spent the last 3 years coaching the Bills wide receivers.
All right. I don't know if there's links to McCarthy there. I'm going to have to go look at it, but we're going to have to probably wrap up the podcast here, Dave, because we're one-man band today with the guys all out of town. I'm going to have to go write up this news.
All right. Thanks for listening. You can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button. Follow the directions that way. We'll try to get through more of your emails on the Friday show. So Alex has got to get busy here, and we're signing off. So as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.